So, if your business faced a catastrophic lawsuit tomorrow, or if you unexpectedly passed away, would your life's work just evaporate? Or would your family's wealth remain, completely untouched?
Yeah, that is, it's a heavy question.
It really is. But, I mean, it is one that literally every single business owner needs to answer for themselves.
Absolutely. Because, well, it's the ultimate stress test for how you've structured your financial life, right? Building wealth requires an entirely different skill set than preserving it.
Right, yeah. Like making the money versus keeping the money.
Exactly. You can be brilliant at generating revenue, but if your structural foundation is cracked, just one bad lawsuit can wipe out decades of work.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And, well, that is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We are going to demystify South African trust structures.
Which is so needed, honestly.
Right. We are breaking down this comprehensive, highly technical analysis of trading versus family trusts.
Yeah.
And we're also looking at the practical on-the-ground methodology of Limca Sturman.
Yeah, she is a leading South African trust consultant.
She is. And the goal here is to show you how separating the concept of, like, ownership from risk can help you build this impenetrable asset protection fortress for your wealth.
I love that term, the fortress, because that separation is, it's the crucial piece. I mean, most entrepreneurs unknowingly walk around with massive financial exposure.
Yeah, just totally exposed.
Right. Their personal assets, their business risks, their tax liabilities. It's all just, tangled up in one messy knot under their own name.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can even talk about choosing the right structure, we have to define what a trust actually is.
Right. Back to basics.
Yeah, because a lot of people seem to operate under the assumption that a trust is just like a different flavor of a company, right? Like a PD-LTD.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge misconception.
But it operates entirely differently under South African law.
It is fundamentally different. I mean, a company is a distinct legal entity. It can sue, it can be sued, it exists almost like an artificial person.
Right.
But a trust is not a legal entity in that way. It's actually a legal relationship.
A relationship.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dig into how that actually functions in practice, because the word relationship sounds kind of vague when we're talking about millions of rands.
Oh, I get that. So specifically, it's a triangular relationship. You have the founder, that's the person who creates the trust and initially funds it.
Okay, got it.
Then you have the trustee who legally manages those assets. And finally, the beneficiary who, ultimately gets the benefit of those assets.
So it's a three-way dynamic.
Exactly. And all of this operates under the strict oversight of the Master of the High Court here in South Africa.
Under the Trust Property Control Act, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so the true superpower of this triangle-like, the reason wealthy families have used this structure for centuries, is that it legally severs ownership from benefit.
Right.
The trustees legally hold the assets, but they don't get the financial reward, and the beneficiaries get the financial reward, but they don't legally own the underlying assets.
Yes, and in South Africa, the most powerful variation business owners use is the discretionary trust.
Discretionary, meaning the trustees have a choice.
Exactly. It means the trustees have the power to decide who gets what and when. You aren't locked into rigid percentage payouts like you would be with company dividends.
Okay, so take the case of a guy named Mr. Naidu from our source material. He sets up a discretionary trust for his 3 kids.
A classic setup.
Right. And then years down the line, his eldest child suddenly faces these massive, unexpected medical bills. Because it's a discretionary trust, the trustees can look at the situation and say, we are going to distribute extra funds to the eldest right now to cover this crisis.
Which is incredibly useful for families.
Yeah, and meanwhile, his youngest child has just landed this high-paying corporate job and doesn't actually need the money. So the trustees just hold back distributions for the youngest and let that capital grow inside the trust.
Exactly. It allows the trust to respond dynamically to the family's actual real-time needs over decades.
It's brilliant. But I am hung up on one thing, though. So a trust is basically a financial vault. You put your wealth inside, the trustees guard the door, and the beneficiaries get the contents when they actually need them.
Good analogy, yeah.
But wait, if I'm the founder and I put my hard-earned money in, and I don't technically own it anymore, do I just lose all control? Like, am I just crossing my fingers and hoping the trustees do what I want?
I mean, this raises an important question, and it really is the #1 fear most founders have.
I would definitely be terrified.
Right. But the short answer is no. You don't lose all control, but your relationship to the control changes.
How so?
Well, you can be the founder and also act as one of the trustees. You can even be a beneficiary at the same time.
Hold on. If I'm the trustee and I decide who gets what, isn't that just a backdoor way of keeping total control?
It sounds like it, yeah.
How does a judge not see right through that and just declare it a sham?
Because of fiduciary duty, when you wear the trustee hat, the law requires you to act in the best interests of the beneficiaries as a group.
Not just yourself.
Right, you can't just do whatever you want for your personal gain. And to prevent it from being a sham, the master of the high court usually requires an independent trustee to sit on the board with you.
Oh, I see. Someone outside the family.
Exactly. Someone who has no family ties and no beneficial interest. The goal is to control the system without owning the assets personally.
That makes sense.
The independent trustee basically ensures you don't treat the trust's bank account like your own personal wallet.
Got it. So if a trust is like a vault guarded by trustees, what happens when you decide to run your entire daily business inside that vault?
Oh, well, that brings us to the first major operating structure, which is the trading trust.
A trading trust is exactly what it sounds like, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Instead of running a retail shop or a consulting firm through a traditional company, the trust itself conducts the business operations.
So the trust employs the staff, signs the leases, holds the inventory.
Exactly. It takes on all the daily commercial activities.
I was reading about a Mrs. Pillay who used this to massive effect for income splitting.
Oh, yeah, her case is fascinating.
She ran a highly profitable retail shop through a trading trust. If the shop made, say, R1,000,000 in profit, and she took it all herself as a sole proprietor, she'd be hit with the highest marginal tax rate.
Which is steep in South Africa.
Right. But because the business was a trust, the trustees could split that R1,000,000 equally among 4 family members who were all beneficiaries.
So each person received 250,000 Rand.
Exactly. Which meant each person was taxed at a dramatically lower individual rate. The family's total tax burden just dropped through the floor.
It is highly efficient for specific scenarios like that, but sometimes the primary driver is purely about asset protection.
Like with Dr. Mokoena.
Yes, look at the medical professional, Dr. Mokoena. She runs her practice through a trading trust. In the medical field, malpractice risk is a constant, terrifying reality.
I can only imagine.
By operating through the trust, she created a legal barrier. If she faced a massive lawsuit, her personal and family assets were entirely separated from her professional activities.
So her house and savings are safe.
Exactly. For her, that asset protection completely outweighed any minor administrative headaches of running a trust.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
If income splitting is so great and my assets are protected like Dr. Mokoena, why doesn't every single entrepreneur just run a trading trust? Like, why do 3D Ltd companies even exist if trading trusts are this powerful?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the South African tax code actively punishes growth inside a trust.
Wait, punishes?
Heavily. Think about why the government taxes trusts differently. A company eventually gets sold or liquidated, right?
Sure.
And an individual eventually dies, which triggers a state duty. But a trust can theoretically live forever.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. If the government didn't step in, wealthy families could hoard billions inside trusts for centuries without ever paying estate taxes or dealing with high individual tax brackets.
So the tax authorities have to intervene somehow.
And they intervene with a sledgehammer.
A sledgehammer.
Pretty much. If a trading trust distributes its profits to beneficiaries, great, they pay their individual tax rates. But what if the business needs to keep the money to grow?
Like if you need to buy new machinery or hire more staff.
Right, or build a new facility. Any income retained inside a trust is taxed at a flat, punitive rate of 45%.
Wait, 45%? That is brutal.
It's massive.
I mean, a standard company pays a corporate tax rate of 27% on retained earnings. That is an 18% difference just for keeping your own money to grow your own business.
Exactly. And on top of that, trusts face an effective capital gains tax rate of 36%.
Wow.
Which is significantly higher than both individuals and companies.
There's a really painful cautionary tale in the source material about a family named the Governors.
Oh, the manufacturing business, yeah. That one hurts to read.
They ran a successful manufacturing business through a trading trust for 15 years, and it worked perfectly while they were just paying themselves the profits every single year.
Right, because they were just using the individual tax rates.
But then the business scaled up. They needed to buy 2 million Rand worth of new manufacturing equipment, so they just left that 2 million inside the trust to fund the purchase.
which triggers that 45% rate.
Exactly. Because of that flat rate, they had to pay 900,000 Rand in tax.
Ouch.
If they had been operating as a normal company at the 27% rate, they would have paid 360,000 Rand less. They literally lost enough capital to buy a decent delivery vehicle just because they were trapped in the wrong structure for a growing business.
It is the ultimate tax trap, you know. Trading trusts are fantastic if your business model allows you to distribute every cent of profit every single year.
But who can actually do that while scaling?
Very few. The moment you need to retain capital to scale, the tax burden becomes a wealth destroyer.
So, because retaining profits in a trading trust is financially punishing, we clearly need a different vehicle to protect accumulated wealth without that tax penalty.
Enter the heavy hitter, the family trust.
The family trust.
This is the true wealth preserver. A family trust serves a fundamentally different purpose. It does not conduct daily business at all.
So no staff, no inventory.
Right. It doesn't have employees. It doesn't have customers. It doesn't sign commercial leases. Its sole job is to hold and protect assets.
Like investment portfolios, properties, or shares in other companies.
Exactly.
The Vandermurray family is a perfect example of how this plays out in the real world.
Yes, the construction business.
They had a highly profitable construction business. But instead of leaving all their cash sitting inside the vulnerable business account or buying personal houses in their own names, they systematically transferred their profits into a family trust.
A very smart move.
Right. So the trust bought property and investments completely independent of the construction company.
And then the market turned.
Yeah, when the construction industry eventually crashed and their operating business went under, the creditors swarmed the company.
Of course they did.
But they couldn't touch the family's core wealth. It survived totally untouched because it was safely insulated inside the family trust.
Which is the dream scenario for asset protection.
So what does this all mean for you listening? If my business is struggling, can I just, transfer my house, my cars, and all my cash into a family trust the day before I declare bankruptcy and walk away totally safe?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of the Insolvency Act, the answer is absolutely not.
I figured it sounded too easy.
Yeah, you cannot use a trust as an emergency escape hatch. The law is very clear about fraudulent transfers.
Fraudulent transfers.
Right. If you transfer assets into a trust when you know insolvency is imminent, or to purposefully defeat your existing creditors, the courts have mechanisms to simply set those transfers aside.
So they just reverse it.
Exactly. They can look back up to 2 years, and sometimes much longer if they can prove malicious intent. They will pull those assets right back out of the trust to pay your debts.
Okay, so timing is everything. You have to build the roof before it starts raining.
Timing and operational independence. You also have to navigate what they call alter ego challenges.
Alter ego.
Yeah,
Like a superhero identity.
kind of, but legal. This is when a creditor claims the trust is just an extension of you.
Oh, I see.
Think about the legal mechanism here. If a judge looks at your bank statements and sees you using the trust account to buy your personal groceries,
Oh, that's bad.
or they note that you never hold trustee meetings, or that you never even consult the independent trustee, the judge will declare the trust a sham.
And what happens then?
They pierce the corporate veil, ignore the trust deed entirely, declare the assets belong to you personally, and just hand them over to your creditors.
Wow. So the protection only works if the trust is treated like a living, breathing, independent relationship.
Yes, exactly.
There's a stark contrast in the case studies here. The Pillay family set up their family trust 20 years ago. They funded it gradually during the good times.
And they ran it properly.
Yeah, they had an independent professional trustee. They kept meticulous minutes of every quarterly meeting. When a massive liability claim hit them 2 decades later, that trust was legally bulletproof.
And then consider the flip side, a woman named Mrs. Chetty.
Yes, Mrs. Chetty. She put her beautiful holiday home into a family trust, thinking she was just, ticking an asset protection box for her own benefit.
Right, a lot of people do that.
But then years later, she decides she wants to sell the house and use the cash for a world tour. She suddenly realizes she can't just list it on Property 24 herself.
Because she doesn't technically own it anymore.
Exactly. The trustees have to formally agree that selling is in the best interest of all the beneficiaries. They have to follow strict voting procedures.
And the cash from the sale.
It belongs to the trust, not to her personal bank account.
Oh, I'm sure she was thrilled about that.
She was furious. She achieved asset protection, but she was so angry because she didn't realize she had actually given up her personal unilateral control.
Well, that is the trade-off. True asset protection means you cannot have unfettered personal control.
You can't have your cake and eat it too.
Right. Because if you have the power to liquidate an asset on a whim, a judge will ensure your creditors have that exact same power.
Okay, so if trading trusts tax you too heavily when you try to grow your business, and family trusts aren't legally designed to run a daily business,
Mm.
how do wealthy families actually build multi-generational wealth?
It's a puzzle, isn't it?
Yeah, like they can't possibly be taking that 45% tax hit every year.
Well, they don't. They combine them.
The classic company and trust structure.
Exactly. This is what the most sophisticated business owners eventually transition to.
How does that work in practice?
You use a standard operating company, like Applied Ltd., to run the actual business. The company hires the staff, signs the leases, and takes all the commercial risk.
Okay, that makes sense.
And because it is a company, it pays that lower 27% tax rate on any profits it retains to fuel its growth.
When we push the metaphor we used earlier,
Yeah.
the operating company is the moat.
The mode, yes.
If a supplier sues you or a commercial lease goes bad, they fall into the moat. They can freeze the company's checking account. They can seize the company's inventory. But where does the trust fit in?
The family trust is the castle. It sits safely behind the moat.
I love this visual.
The family trust owns the shares of the operating company. When the company decides to pay out its profits as dividends, those dividends flow up into the family trust.
So the legal drawbridge is pulled up.
Exactly. The creditors in the moat cannot cross the legal water to touch the accumulated wealth inside the castle.
The Nkosi manufacturing case study maps this out beautifully. David Nkosi built a highly profitable manufacturing firm.
A great example of doing it right.
Right. He set up an operating company to handle the factory, but he had his family trust hold 40% of the company's shares.
So a huge chunk of the value.
Over the next 17 years, the dividends flowed into the trust, which used the cash to build an 8 million rand commercial property portfolio completely separate from the factory.
And the brilliance of that structure really proved itself during his succession planning.
Oh, absolutely. David had 3 kids. His son had worked in the business for 15 years and was ready to take over as managing director.
But the other kids weren't involved.
Yeah, his 2 daughters had different careers and zero interest in manufacturing. Because of the structure, David let his son step up and slowly acquire more operational shares of the moat.
While the family trust took care of the rest of the family.
Exactly. The castle, which held the massive property portfolio, ensured that all 3 children were financially provided for. It solved the succession problem and the fairness problem without, breaking up the underlying business.
The moat takes the damage, the castle preserves the legacy. However, you really cannot just sketch this fortress on a napkin and expect it to hold up during a SARS audit.
No, I imagine not.
When you connect companies and trusts, you introduce severe legal complexity.
Let's talk about that complexity, because it sounds like a minefield. Could I just set up a trust and then, sell my business to it on an interest-free loan to avoid donations tax?
Oh man, you just walked right into Section 7 attribution rules.
I had a feeling that wouldn't work.
SARS anticipates these exact maneuvers. If a founder donates money to the trust or sells an asset to the trust on an interest-free loan, Section 7 attributes the income generated by that asset straight back to the founder's personal tax return.
So SARS sees right through the mechanism.
Absolutely. You also have to navigate deemed interest and really complex loan accounts. If you get the plumbing wrong between the moat and the castle, SARS will find the leak and penalize you heavily.
So knowing the blueprint of this fortress is one thing. Actually building it without triggering a massive capital gains tax event requires a specialist.
You absolutely cannot DIY this.
And that brings us to the methodology of Lumka Sturman. She is a South African trust consultant and an asset protection specialist.
Yes, and her entire focus is on solving the exact structural problems we've been dissecting today.
What is particularly effective about her approach is how educational and analytical it is.
She really focuses on the positive aspects of what these structures can do.
Right. She points out that most South African entrepreneurs are operating in a state of, mixed liability.
It's so common.
They have valuable real estate sitting in their personal names. They have trading companies holding major wealth. Instead of just operating, they sign personal sureties blindly.
And they have zero succession plans.
Basically leaving the drawbridge down and the castle doors wide open.
Yeah, asking for trouble.
But Lumka's process is designed to fix that systematically. She starts with these foundation audits.
Which is such a critical first step.
Think about the mechanics of an audit like that. She is looking at how to structurally move an asset from your vulnerable personal name into a secure trust without triggering massive taxes today.
Right, because the timing of the transfer is everything.
She structures it through specialized loan accounts and preference shares to basically freeze the value of your estate right now while shifting all the future growth into the safety of the trust.
It's about creating holistic SARS-compliant architecture. A trust is not a static document you just shove in a drawer and forget about.
Right, because life changes.
Exactly. Laws change, family dynamics shift, the business scales. If your trust documents haven't been reviewed in 5 years, you are almost certainly out of compliance and vulnerable to an alter ego challenge.
That is why she offers these annual Fortress checkups. It's an ongoing relationship.
It really is.
It's about giving you the peace of mind that your wealth is secure, that your family is protected.
Which is priceless.
If you are generating income and building assets in South Africa, you really need to look at how she structures these protections. Her focus is on the immensely positive aspects of what a properly structured trust can do for investors and families.
I highly recommend looking into her work.
You can explore her process, make it educational, and see exactly how she builds these fortresses at her website, which is www.limcasterman.com.
It really is about moving from a reactive posture to a proactive strategy. Hard work makes the money, but structural planning is what actually keeps it.
Yes, by separating your ownership from your risk, you ensure that no matter what happens to the business out there in the moat, the castle remains totally secure.
It ensures business continuity, it manages tax liabilities legally and efficiently, and most importantly, it secures generational stability.
Well, we've covered massive ground today.
We really have.
We unpacked the fiduciary mechanics of how trustees operate. We explored why SARS brutally penalizes trading trusts with a 45% flat tax. And we broke down the ultimate combination of an operating company feeding a family trust.
A full fortress.
The full fortress. But I want to leave you, our listener, with something a bit deeper to ponder on your own.
Oh, I like where this is going.
We've spent all this time detailing the legal and financial mechanics of giving up technical ownership to gain ultimate protection. But think about the psychological shift that requires.
It's a huge mindset change.
If a trust legally separates you from your wealth to protect it, does it also change your psychological relationship with money?
Wow.
When you wake up one day and realize you no longer technically own your life's work, but rather you are merely stewarding it for the next generation, how does that shift the way you define your own personal success?
That really is the real deep dive right there.
Something to mull over.
Until
Until next time, keep digging deeper.